How many people are silently watching? Silent in the sense that there are no visible indicators of their presence. Doesn't show any views, doesn't show any thumbs up, doesn't show anything. For all I know, no one is there. There could be 1 million people there. What's the difference? Obviously, the state of my knowledge. And in a sense, the state of the others involved concerning their knowability or their availability to being known. This sets up automatically an artificial condition whereby someone is exposed and to what he is forced to remain oblivious. Now, could this be changed by simply altering the view count or the any other types of signals that could show up on my end? Only superficially. There could be ways of rigging that so that it appears to suggest what one may in good faith presume to be the case, but which in fact may not be the case. There may be one person or no persons. There may be automatically a program which detects this live streaming and then artificially subtracts the number of views or adds a number of views. In the first case, to make it much lower than the actual views, and in the second case, to make it much higher than the actual views. And in the first case, there could be any number, and yet it could still show 0. And in the second case, there could be none at all, and it could show any number. So that basically there could be a sign showing no viewers, and there could be any number of viewers, and there could be a sign showing any number of viewers, and there actually be no viewers. It could be completely inverted. Those two different possibilities, taken out to some representative extremes, could set up a certain space of consideration where the actual reality could be any combination of those two extremes. And in the exact middle, there's a one-to-one correspondence between the signals indicating the number of viewers and the actual number of viewers. Does anyone really believe that that's the reality of how any social media platforms on the internet operate? Really? After all the evidence that's come out to everybody's consideration, with observable, detectable indicators of manipulation of those attributes of this communication venue, the indications of participation versus actual participation of communicants over these venues. So if that is understood to be deviant from that ideal of one-to-one correspondence, truth and transparency on this platform, even without a conspiracy needing to be contrived for that, to explain that, why would anyone think that the entire domain of potential communication arrangements indicating information flowing from a sender to a receiver, each of them representing some potential for an ideal transmission of information or any number of permutations which deviate from that. And you could look at all of those possibilities as being topologically centered on that ideal, being distortions of a fundamental connection which is maintained in the abstract but can go from one extreme to the other or be in any number of possible permutations in between. Those are all the topologies. And a topology really that's sort of the originally any I wouldn't say, for example, a logos as an entity. You could say logics, for example, and you could describe different forms of psychology, schools of psychology, as different psychologies. But a topology, really, topology is a subject in mathematics, describing ways of representing invariant properties through transformations of whatever domain of elements it is that contains those properties or in which those properties inhere. So let's say a hole in an object or a completely a lacuna or a nothingness completely surrounded by some type of substance or just a set of elements which opens so that a context around that object can pass completely through. For example, a donut. Topologically speaking, a coffee mug is identical to a donut on the axis of that consideration alone, so that, let's say you made a donut out of, let's say you made a coffee mug out of basically dough, and you baked it. It would basically be a donut with this mug shape attached to it. The property that they would both have in common is one hole going all the way through. On that consideration, they're identical. The donut can't be used to hold a volume of liquid in the same way that a cup can. That's a different consideration. But the indentation that enables that can actually be created in a donut if there's sufficient room, even if you could only take a small portion of that donut and make a small indentation and hold a small volume of liquid. So there's another consideration that could be considered invariant. But if you compare those two, an indentation versus a hole going all the way through, there's a significant mathematical difference. Yeah, even if you're just considering ideal geometric shapes. If you use these shapes to represent flows of or let's just say data sets other than just numbers, or you could say connections between people, links between people and things and places, or you could run a series of topological models over, say, big data sets, and determine from that relationships that would be perhaps not intuitively obvious at the outset from normal perceptual modes of interaction and with those data sets that a normal person has available to them. And through this, you could investigate relationships and possibilities that would otherwise be inscrutable to the unaided reason. Well, these relationships would exist in reality regardless, but the ability to know them is better enabled by having a system or methodology of modeling these things in the abstract. And that's what mathematics really helps enable so well, that we've gone from just, digging holes in the earth with our bare hands to, strip mining with gigantic equipment. I mean, it's just, there's obviously a precision that's enabled by mathematics and an evolution of development which is enabled by the scientific method, which speaks for themselves. In considering what the internet is, supposedly, in terms of just its hardware, it's connecting machinery, computers, other devices, to one another in networks. That's what it is. An internet of such devices could be local, could be extended over a very large space. Assuredly, there's a history to the development of this technology, and it was used by the military and specific corporations, and also locally within businesses, and you could look at, for example, to take it out of the physical hardline model, radio wave communication between CBs. The frequency is attuned between the communicants, and they're able to broadcast to each other and receive each other's broadcasts and communicate. If that were enabled on a physical level, there would have to be protocols to control the information flow so that it becomes distinguishable from noise. And that was developed with the telephone line and the telegraph, the telephone line, and then the telephone rather, and then it just continued on to fiber optics. And so the connections between computers works on the same principle as basically the telegraph. Information is channeled from one device to another. It's put in a form that can travel across whatever the medium is, as some series of transmissions of light or electricity, which are received somewhere and then translated into another form that's decoded by another device so that communication could take place. That's how that works as a rough outline. Now, at any point as this occurs, if you just think that's how it works, first of all, there are switchboard mechanisms that enable this to be this flow of information to be trafficked through over long distances reliably, and they're organized through hubs, and they go in and out of these hubs, and they're redirected to their inevitable destination, ideally, supposedly. So you can see there are already other nodes in between the transmitter and the receiver of information. It's not like it's going through some kind of straight tunnel from, like as if I were talking from one tin can to another. So there's obviously many ways that this could be affected or affect other parties, be affected by other parties or affect other parties along the route to its intended recipient, this information from its receiver. So with that going on, you already have an issue because while the ideal structure of communication might be sustained, the abstract topology of sender and receiver might remain intact, there may be many permutations in terms of who or what comes into contact with that on the way to the recipient, whether or not any distortions occur, whether or not any sentient gathering of information or insentient gathering of information should occur on that route. And even whether any of that exists at all, there's still that sender-receiver aspect to the formula. And then you have to consider all the possibilities of distortion, which could naturally exist or could be imposed by any agents in between those two. Well, and you have to consider also all of the information that can be obtained from it without directly affecting that flow of information. So therefore, the information could flow from sender to receiver, and in many possible worlds of difference look exactly the same to both the sender and the receiver. And yet, these worlds could be so different that in one of them, there's nobody in between the two observing the information whatsoever. And in another one, there's a million people observing it, none of them are detected. You see? And all those are topologically related according to the constraints of intention, perception, and a flow of information ongoing between two agents, presumed to be by the sender and the intended receiver. And none of which necessarily need identify and no information about any of these worlds obtainable directly by the sender need necessarily indicate how to the sender that there's a discrimination that could even need take place. They may never even realize any of these possibilities because they're just too naive. They have too much faith in arrangements in this world to conceive of such possibilities. And those could even go further to be more or less malignant, more or less intentional, more or less connected to other interests or agendas. That's an overall that's an overview of how I use the term topology in this context. Now I'm going to just call each instance of a topological mapping a topology until I find a better term. And people will understand what I mean, because an instance of a topological feature, which could vary in many ways and in many contexts, but would be invariant in its topological essence across all those contexts or features, is in its own sense the very essence of topology anyway. And so all these are distinct forms of topology's manifestation and are, in a sense, sort of topologies. Now, does anybody in this internet topology, which is me, the sender, through the internet to anybody that can find this video live, as however it's distributed into the world through YouTube right now, through the internet. YouTube, first of all, computer, the network that distributes it toward what's presumably YouTube, and it goes through Fusion Center first, goes to YouTube, server at the Fusion Center that's a proxy for YouTube, whatever. However this thing circulates, and since it's not intended to any particular recipient, any recipient's activity should be shown if this were a truly transparent and open mechanism of communication. I see no viewers, no thumbs up. Or down for that matter. So, what's really going on here is the question. And where is the chat feature? I've got it showing chat messages, but there are no chat messages. So here's the deal. No one's showing up. No one's here but me, supposedly, according to all the information I see right now. Leaving aside everything I know about echelon, stellar wind, and all this other perverted crap that people have criminally been engaged in on false pretexts of just very disingenuous claims of authority and honorable intent. Leaving all that aside, okay? Leaving aside any of my interpretations of these circumstances, however outlandish they may seem and however accurate they may be, I want a sentient person involved in these scryings, if you will, to announce themselves and confess. Confess your involvement and explain why you think what you're doing is appropriate. Because if you were validly picking up this signal, you would show as a viewer right now. Who do you think you are to sneak in to an open forum, to sneak in? Like if there were a stadium full of people, they would have doors to go in and out. And if there was something to be said, unless it was just open, coming and go, well, you still have to show up. People will still see you walking in unless you're invisible. There's some kind of control to this. There are only so many entrances and exits. There are only so many seats, only so much space, so many donuts and coffee to go around. There are some topological consistencies between one public venue and another, regardless of the methods of admission or the content or the agents involved, and they can be more or less strict. But nobody just invisibly waltzes in. And nobody is made invisible against their will or intent or knowledge or without their knowledge either. For all I know, there are 30,000 people watching this. None of them can give me a signal because it's been topologically restricted that they're present in any form, but can receive this information. But I can't know that. Likewise, some of these people may not be a genuine audience anyway, but knowledgeably come in, knowing that they're invisible, and are there simply to monitor, perhaps stir up some shit. This doesn't just go on this one live maiden voyage of live streaming on YouTube. This goes on all over the damn place. Even if it were just a rock concert, there could be agitators going in under the pretext of being fans when they're just there to start some shit. And they can be paid by anyone who can fork over some Federal Reserve rag. You see? And they can be given that on any pretexts by anybody for any reason. You think that's how you protect freedom? You're a joke! You think recruiting meth heads off the streets or making deals with people that should be behind bars to go around committing crimes on the pretext that they're helping protect this great nation? You think that makes you fucking American dad, motherfucker? Look at this, look at this. You think I'm a punk? You think you can spy on me, manipulate my communication with others, quarantine and harass me as though I were a fucking alien, get paid on the dole to do that shit with counterfeit money from a goddamn racket. But you ain't got the guts to face me in a cage, I goddamn guarantee you. I'll fucking make you mangled and unrecognizable for the rest of your fucking life if you survive. I promise you, you son of a bitch. Now you fucking show up on there, you fucking show you're there, and you fucking communicate. You coward. Or you get the fuck out of the way. Because you don't have the right to restrict people's freedom of speech and communication on any fucking pretext. Even if I am using a specific venue that has its own rights. It has to make clear that it's engaging in that kind of filtration and censorship. Specifically to me. You don't have the right to carry on a fraud. Certainly not under color of authority. You don't have the right to reduce law to a facile excuse to run a protection racket on people. You despicable fucking cowards! Fucking crack dealing, gun toting gangs in LA have more honor than you sons of bitches. Who are you two people? Go on, announce yourselves. Here's what I bet. I bet if either of you two viewers, which I can see supposedly, are actually there could be no persons there. It could just be machines creating, basically a program creating that image of there being two viewers. Or there could be one, or there could be fucking 30,000 and just two showing right there. It could be any permutation. Which one is it? I just want one of you frauds to confess and identify yourself publicly. You are the rot. You are the rot which has turned this world into a living hell. How do you think you don't deserve to live in hell? I'd like to see, you know what? I would like to meet the scum involved in such activities. I would like to look at their careers and their lives and their educations. I'd like to see how they raise their families and how they live. I'd like to see, just to confirm what I already know. I bet you're some shallow, despicable, weak-egoed, insecure, cowardly, perverted, unread, unstudied, unreflective sellouts. I bet you take bribes up the ass, don't you? I bet your masters don't even have to gold dick you, do they? Bet they put fucking chips in your heads. Who the fuck do you think you are to keep me safe? To keep your fucking selves safe? You think your families are safe? You think you're safe? The more you know and the more involved you are, the better you ought to know. It's a goddamn mockery. You shouldn't be using language. You shouldn't even be speaking with a human form. How many children have been ground up under your watch? Or under your looking away with indifference and intuitive cowardice? But YouTube, if that's what it is, because again, I spent the last 30 minutes talking to an apparently zero audience, because YouTube likes to show me, through its recommendations, for whatever reason, all of the abused animals in the world and how lovey-dovey people are toward them. Well, guess what? It's way worse than that. You mean these things are being uncovered? What the hell were you doing for the last 50 years? Licking your asses? Directed energy weapons, secretly deployed against anyone they see fit. Not so freely against other countries who have the same weaponry, am I right? Because that shit will be returned back to you. But what about the population at large in the country? Do they have directed energy weapons? Do they have control? Do they have covert control and capabilities of manipulation over internet topologies? Do they? Do they even know what an internet topology is? Do they even know what topology is? See, you're cowards. You're despicable. You're like those freaks that abuse children and dogs and cats when no one's around to watch, or so they think. You better hope there's not a God as you think he is. Or actually probably command you to do this sick shit, judging by some of the holy texts I've seen. You want to impress me with your authority? With your cryptic knowledge? You want to be my psychopomp? You're pompous fools! And everybody that turns a blind eye and a deaf ear to the truth of this are cowards and scums and should be rolled right along with you into hell. Head first. One fucking person, one thumb up, but I supposedly have 800 subscribers. This is a fucking racket and a fraud. You're so weak. This is what you have to do to maintain a facile sense of control because you're so weak. You're so lame. You're so deformed. You can't show yourselves. And you're so ashamed and you're so lame and insecure, you have to suppress anyone else's emanations into the world. And you have to set up these massive frauds. And you have to hobble everyone, whether they know it or not. And your biggest fantasy is how hard you can wreck and ruin others while they'll still thank you for it. That's all that gets you off. That's why people show up on your radar as targeted individuals. According to this apparent trend. Because it's in your spiritual essence. If there weren't technological bolsterings for what you do, or rigged narratives pervading the world of events as they really occur and as they are portrayed and misportrayed through your very thoroughly and fraudulently controlled media apparatuses, you would still be engaged in seeking out anybody that would defy your weakness and cowardice. Do you see fancy jewelry on me? Do you see me clambering around looking for one of you so that I can impress you with my talents? Like this is a fucking circus? I'm surrounded by you, willingly or unwillingly. You're cowards, and you have riddled the world with your disease. That's what I have to say to you.